All right, get ready to explore the world of Hermetic philosophy.
Ancient secrets, hidden meanings, transforming ourselves. We're diving into Don Pernety's Fables Egyptiennes et Grecques.
This book's wild. It's
Yep.
like Pernety took science and mythology and blended them together, like those myths were textbooks in disguise.
Exactly, and that's what makes this deep dive so interesting. It's not just about turning lead into gold, but a quest for, spiritual enlightenment, a way to understand the universe and how we fit in.
Okay, so let's back up for those who might not know. What is Hermetic philosophy exactly? There's this air of mystery around it.
It's like that secret society you always thought existed but could never find. It goes back to ancient Egypt, connected to Hermes Trismegistus. Imagine wisdom and knowledge all rolled into one figure. Now picture this. Philosophy, mysticism, and early scientific inquiry all mixed together. That's Hermeticism.
Proto-science with a mystical twist. I like it. So no incense or cryptic rituals.
Not exactly. While they did rituals, Hermetic philosophy focuses on really observing, like figuring out nature's hidden mechanics, and then using that knowledge for personal transformation.
Which makes Pernety's choice to teach with myths even more interesting. Why not just say it directly? Why hide this wisdom in stories?
Sharing this openly back then, let's just say it could land you in hot water. Accusations of heresy, dabbling in forbidden things. Myths were the perfect disguise. They could share with those in the know while keeping it hidden from those who might abuse it.
A secret code. Very cool. And Pernety's book dives right in. The table of contents reads like a treasure map, with chapters titled Principles of Hermetic Philosophy right next to the alchemical interpretation of myths.
Pernety believed that by cracking the code of these symbols, we unlock a deeper understanding of, well, ourselves and the universe. It's about looking beyond the surface to uncover the philosophical truth underneath.
It's like those optical illusions where you see one thing, then bam, a whole new image appears. You can't unsee it. And Pernety really breaks down the elements: earth, air, fire, water. But he's not talking about dirt, wind, and flames, right?
Not exactly. Think of it this way. The alchemists, they didn't see the elements just as physical things, but as, like, blueprints. Archetypal principles that are the foundation of creation and transformation. Each element had a spiritual essence, which is a very different take than our modern scientific view.
Okay, so a lump of coal isn't just a lump of coal. It's a symbol of something more. I'm intrigued.
Exactly. Take Earth, for example. We connect it with stability, being grounded. Fire makes us think of passion, change. For the alchemists, these weren't just metaphors. They were fundamental truths about reality.
So if we understand how these elements work within us, within the world, that's the key to unlocking.
What? Think balance. A harmony with both the natural world and within ourselves. It's like harnessing the energy of fire, that grounded stability of earth, to achieve a kind of internal alchemy.
That's an aha moment. They mapped the human experience onto like the periodic table. It makes you wonder if they saw their work as a spiritual practice instead of just science.
Exactly. And this is where Pernety's use of Greek myths gets really cool. He directly connects the stages of the alchemical process to stories like Osiris, Isis, and Typhon.
You mean the one where Osiris is tricked by his brother, Set, often seen as Typhon, and chopped up, and Isis has to find all his pieces to bring him back?
The very same. Now picture this. Osiris's death and resurrection, they're not just a sad story. They're a representation of the alchemical process.
Well, you're saying Osiris being dismembered is like the first step in an alchemical experiment.
Precisely. His body scattered represents breaking down a substance, the base metal in this case, to its core essence. And Isis, carefully gathering his remains. That's the alchemist carefully tending to their experiment, guiding the transformation.
And Typhon, the god of chaos who caused this whole mess, I'm guessing he's not a symbol of anything good.
Not quite. He represents the risks inherent in the alchemical process, the chance things could go wrong, that unpredictable nature of transformation.
Wow, talk about seeing a story in a new light. It makes you wonder if those ancient storytellers intentionally put this wisdom into their myths.
Okay, it's a question that's been around for centuries. Did the alchemists see these connections in already existing stories, or did the stories come from an even older understanding of the universe?
Now that's something to ponder. But Pernety doesn't stop with just one myth. He also decodes the symbolism in Jason's quest for the Golden Fleece.
Ah, yes. The Golden Fleece, it's practically overflowing with alchemical symbolism. It's no coincidence that the prize is gold, the ultimate symbol of spiritual perfection for alchemists.
Right. But what about the fleece and that dragon guarding it? There's got to be more to them.
For the alchemists, that almost magical fleece, it represented the elusive philosopher's stone.
The philosopher's stone,
Mm.
the mythical thing that gives immortality and, of course, turns lead into gold. I always thought that was just a legend.
It was the holy grail for them. It symbolized total enlightenment and perfection. And the dragon, think of it as a guardian. It represents those raw, untamed forces of nature that you have to face on the path to enlightenment.
So Jason killing the dragon isn't just some heroic act. It's the alchemist overcoming those challenges, mastering those forces to reach their goal.
Exactly. Remember, the alchemists believed that true transformation, whether it's matter or spirit, is full of difficulties. You need courage, you need perseverance, and you need a deep understanding of how the universe works to achieve it.
Mind-blowing. Just when I thought we were done with the myths, there's another place Pernety links to alchemy, the Garden of the Hesperides.
Ah, yes, the paradise filled with golden apples, guarded by, you guessed it, another dragon.
Those golden apples have got to be the Philosopher's Stone.
You got it, but there's another layer. This garden, it wasn't just a pretty place. It was a secluded, protected place for those apples to grow undisturbed.
Wait, you're saying the garden represents the alchemist's lab? Their own personal space where they do their experiments?
Precisely. Pernety and lots of alchemists, they believed it was really important to have a controlled space, like a mini-universe, for that delicate transformation to happen.
Like their own little universe in a bottle. It seems like Pernety's method wasn't just about preserving knowledge, it was about making it memorable.
Exactly. By weaving this wisdom into famous myths, he ensured it survived. He created this powerful way to remember and pass down those teachings.
It really shows you how powerful a good story is, how it can stick with you long after you've heard it. But one question keeps popping up for me. Why all the secrecy? What were they so afraid of?
It's a question that's baffled people for centuries. Some think they were afraid of persecution. Others think they wanted to keep this knowledge out of the wrong hands.
Like, imagine giving someone who wants to rule the world the keys to the universe. Bad idea.
Exactly. They understood that real knowledge, especially this kind, was a double-edged sword. It could be used for good or for unimaginable harm.
So these myths and symbols, they were a safety measure. They made sure this knowledge went to those who were truly devoted to its true purpose.
It was a way to protect their work, to make sure its power to transform wasn't misused.
Makes sense.
Wow.
But these were alchemists, not just philosophers, right? They worked with real fire, real elements, which reminds me, they didn't just use any fire, did they? They had different types of fire. Each one had its own, properties.
You're right. Pernety talks about celestial fire, elemental fire, and central fire.
Whoa, hold on. Different kinds of fire. I thought fire was fire. What's the difference?
It's about understanding what makes each type unique. Celestial fire is the purest form, like the sun's energy. It's essential for life, but it won't inherently destroy things.
Okay, I get that. What about elemental fire? The kind we use every day.
Exactly, like what you would use to cook or for heat. It's powerful, but unlike celestial fire, it can get out of control and cause destruction if you're not careful.
And central fire, what's that?
Think of the Earth's core, that molten center of the planet. It's a hidden fire that drives change from within, the force that makes metal, minerals, the very things that make up our world.
So each kind of fire is like a different level of refinement, a different energy.
Exactly. And the alchemists believed that by understanding and mastering these different types of fire, they could harness the fundamental transformative power of the universe.
It's like they were trying to, fine-tune their control, to work with really subtle energies to reach their goals. No wonder alchemy was considered such a difficult art.
It wasn't just about being good at the technical stuff. It was about spiritual awareness, about being in tune with those subtle energies to guide the process.
It strikes me that these alchemists, they weren't just playing around with early chemistry. They were looking for something much bigger, ultimate knowledge, fundamental transformation.
Absolutely. Their goal wasn't just messing with matter. They wanted to mirror those processes within themselves, to become one with the divine. Which leads us to another interesting concept that Pernety explores, alchemy as a metaphor for spiritual transformation.
We've kind of touched on that, but I'd like to dig a little deeper. What was their perspective on that connection?
Think about a seed. It has to, in a way, die to sprout and grow. The alchemists believe that we also have to face our limits, our shadows, to grow spiritually.
Okay, that's pretty deep. So it's not just changing the world outside, but also changing within that reflects those alchemical processes.
Exactly. As they worked with matter, They sought to refine and perfect their souls. They saw those two things as inseparable.
That makes their fascination with time even more interesting. Pernety mentions how long the alchemical process takes, how it seemed to have a different meaning to these philosophers.
You mean the idea of alchemical months? That time wasn't linear, at least not in the way we see it?
Yes, it's like their experience with time was different, more in tune with natural cycles.
Exactly. Time wasn't a straight line to them, but a spiral. More like the natural ebb and flow of nature, with its cycles of growth, decay, and renewal.
So instead of being ruled by the clock, they worked with those natural rhythms of transformation, almost like they could speed up or slow down time.
That's a great way to put it. They thought that if they could match the universe's rhythm, they could go beyond the limits of linear time.
That is fascinating. But before we go too far, let's define some alchemical terms. Pernety uses mercury and philosopher's stone a lot. Let's start with mercury. It's a real element, but there's a deeper meaning, right?
Absolutely. Mercury was more than just a liquid metal to them. It was a symbol of transformation, this link between the physical and the spiritual.
I'm realizing that the alchemists were all about symbolism. What was it about mercury that made it so important?
Think about it. Mercury, it's fluid, always moving. It can bond with other metals. It evaporates and condenses. It's hard to categorize. These qualities, they mirrored the transformative power they saw in the universe, that constant dance of matter and spirit.
I see. So mercury represented the alchemical process, change, fluidity, the interplay of opposites. What about the philosopher's stone? What made it so special?
The Philosopher's Stone was the peak, their ultimate goal. They believed it held the key to the universe's biggest secrets. Imagine turning base metals into gold, curing any disease, even conquering death.
Wow. Now that's one powerful stone. Was it a real physical object or more of like a symbolic aspiration?
That's the million-dollar question. Some alchemists thought it was a real substance, the result of their work. Others thought it was a metaphor for enlightenment, the height of that inner alchemical journey.
So it worked on both levels. The external change of matter and the internal change of the alchemist.
You got it. The alchemists saw a deep connection between the inner and outer worlds. They believed that working with matter could help them achieve spiritual perfection.
This is all so fascinating. But I'm still not quite clear on how these symbols, Mercury, the Philosopher's Stone, even those mythological figures, how do they connect to their actual work?
Remember that for the alchemists, symbolism wasn't separate from what they did. These symbols weren't just abstract ideas, they were thought to hold actual power and could influence how their experiments turned out.
So it's not just about figuring out the meaning, it's about using those symbols in the actual process of alchemy.
Exactly. The alchemist would carefully select everything. The materials, the tools, the timing, even their own state of mind, all to create a kind of symbolic harmony to achieve that transformation.
Like choreographing a dance with all these elements working together in perfect sync.
Exactly. Alchemy was about combining art, science, and spirituality into a single practice. And to unravel the mysteries of this ancient art, you had to understand these symbols.
This has totally changed my view of alchemy. But before we get too caught up in the myths and symbols, let's get back to those operative principles and break them down even further.
You're right. Let's get to the heart of alchemical practice. All right, let's get practical and talk about the actual techniques these alchemists used.
Now you're talking my language. I'm ready for the nuts and bolts, the how-to guide for achieving this transformation.
Think of it like a recipe. But instead of a cake, we're talking refining the very essence of existence. These are the operative principles, the steps in the alchemical process.
Okay, I'm all ears. Where does an aspiring alchemist even begin?
It all starts with calcination. It's the first fiery trial in the alchemical journey.
Calcination. Sounds intense, like burning something to ashes, getting rid of impurities.
You got it. Imagine taking something, heating it up to crazy temperatures until it turns to ash. That's calcination, stripping away the surface to get to that core essence.
So it's about breaking something down into its purest form.
Exactly. Removing what you don't need, the stuff that hides its true nature. Once this fiery trial is done, the alchemist moves on to the next stage, solution.
Solution. Does that involve dissolving those ashes in some sort of magical potion?
In a way, yes. The material, after it's been calcined, is dissolved, often in a special liquid called the menstruum.
Menstruum? That sounds like something straight out of a spell book.
It does, doesn't it? Think of it as a powerful solvent, specially made and full of specific properties to purify and refine the substance even further.
So not just any liquid. It's made for the specific transformation the alchemist wants to achieve.
Exactly, creating the perfect environment for the change to occur. After the calcination and solution, there's a stage that might seem a little strange.
Oh, I have to hear this. What could be more dramatic than turning something to ash and then dissolving it?
Well, this stage is called putrefaction.
Putrefaction, you mean like rotting?
Yeah.
That doesn't sound very transformative. Sounds more like something you'd want to avoid.
It might seem counterproductive, but trust me, it's important. The alchemist would let the dissolved material decompose, sometimes for weeks, even months. But it wasn't about destroying it. It was controlled decay.
I never thought about it like that. It's like letting something break down totally so that something new can be born from what's left.
That's the idea. This stage was seen as crucial for real transformation. Remember, we talked about that seed earlier. Sometimes you have to let go of what you were to grow.
You're giving a whole new meaning to embrace the mess. But the alchemist doesn't just stop there after the decomposition, right? What happens after that?
That's where the real magic happens, in the fermentation stage. After that darkness of putrefaction, the alchemist brings it back to life, introduces air or other elements to make it grow and change.
So it's like adding yeast to dough, that spark that makes it rise and become something new.
Exactly. It's all about guiding the process, gently pushing those ingredients to be their best.
It sounds like a delicate dance between taking action and observing, knowing when to step in and when to just let it happen naturally.
Precisely. The alchemist is like a guide, leading those powerful energies toward a particular result. And from there, the substance goes through rounds of purification and refinement, each one building on the last until
Until it reaches its final, perfected form. So the alchemist is like a sculptor, starting with a rough hunk of stone and carefully chipping away until a masterpiece appears.
Now that's a great analogy. But don't forget, alchemists believed these transformations weren't just happening in their labs, but on a huge scale. They saw those same principles, calcination, solution, putrefaction, fermentation, at work in the birth of stars, the changing seasons, even the cycles of life and death itself.
It's like they were tuned into this universal frequency, their work, in harmony with a very act of creation. But how did they view the goal of all of this? Was it really just about turning lead into gold? Or was there something more to it?
Now that is the question. And the answer is both incredibly simple and amazingly complex. See, gold meant something much deeper than just wealth to alchemists.
I had a feeling we've been talking a lot about the spiritual side of alchemy, this idea of inner transformation. What did gold represent on that deeper symbolic level?
Gold was perfection, purity earned through being refined by fire. It wasn't just about the final product, but the journey to get there, the difficult, intense process of transformation that created it.
So the gold was a symbol, a reminder that you went through the fire and were transformed.
Exactly. And I think that's where the true magic of alchemy is. It's a reminder that real transformation, both inside and out, is usually tough, messy, even uncomfortable sometimes. But just like refining that raw metal into pure gold, it's in the journey that the real growth happens.
Now that is a powerful message. It reminds me of the saying, the obstacle is the path. Alchemists didn't shy away from the tough stuff, those stages of breaking down and rebuilding. They embraced them. They were crucial to reaching the ultimate goal.
Absolutely. It was all about understanding that growth usually comes from the ashes of what was. Real transformation requires courage, patience, and deep respect for the process itself.
This is giving me a lot to think about. But before we get too deep in thought, let's go back to those myths we were discussing. You said the story of Jason and the Golden Fleece is an allegory for the alchemical process. I'm curious how these operative principles, these phases of change, show up in that myth.
Yes. Jason and the Golden Fleece, that story is packed with alchemical parallels. Remember how difficult and dangerous his journey was? He faced storms, sea monsters, even betrayal from his own crew.
Right. And then there was that whole thing with the dragon guarding the fleece and breathing fire, no less. Not a walk in the park.
You got it. Think about those challenges, the dangerous seas, the monsters. They're like metaphors for the different parts of the alchemical process. Each obstacle represents a stage, a test for the alchemist's skill and determination.
So Jason's battles, like with those monstrous birds, or sailing between those crashing rocks, those symbolize the alchemists facing their own challenges, those moments that test and refine them that are so important to the whole process.
Precisely. Remember, alchemists didn't believe transformation just happened. It required action, a willingness to face the unknown and conquer obstacles. Jason couldn't just sail around his problems, and the alchemist had to face theirs head on.
And what about the dragon, this fire-breathing symbol of chaos? There's got to be more to it than just a scary monster protecting a treasure, right?
You bet there is. Remember our chat about the different kinds of fire? The dragon, with all that fire, embodies that raw, untamed energy. It's strong and could be really destructive if you don't respect it and understand it.
So Jason had to conquer that untamed power, just like alchemists had to master those different fires, right?
Exactly. It's about learning how to work with powerful energies, how to harness their potential without letting them consume you.
It's amazing how these alchemical ideas are woven into mythology. Makes you think those old stories weren't just entertainment, but secret teachings passed down for generations.
I completely agree. It suggests a depth of knowledge, a way of seeing the world through this symbolic lens that we're only just starting to understand again.
That's what makes exploring Hermetic philosophy so fascinating. It's like suddenly seeing the world in high definition. You start to see hidden meanings in the most unexpected places. But before we go too far down the rabbit hole of myths and symbols, I think it's time we revisited those operative principles and break them down even more.
You're right. Let's get back to the core of alchemical practice.
So we're diving back into those operative principles, those alchemical steps. And what really struck me is how they're not just instructions, they're really connected to this idea of spiritual change. It's like they mapped out how we grow spiritually onto how matter transforms,
You've hit the nail on the head. It wasn't just about changing a substance, it was about reflecting those changes within. Remember, alchemists saw the universe as this living thing and themselves as little versions of that whole.
They were working on themselves by working with these physical processes. It's a really cool idea.
Exactly. And that's why these steps are so much more than just techniques. They're a guide to understanding how change happens, both inside and out.
That gives me a whole new perspective on them. So we left off at fermentation, where something new starts to emerge. What comes after that initial spark?
Think of fermentation as the turning point, but it's not the end. The substance then goes through more refinements, each one getting it closer to that perfect state.
Like polishing a gem to make it shine its brightest.
Perfect analogy. Alchemists really believed in repetition, carefully guiding the substance through the same steps multiple times, each time getting rid of another imperfection.
Makes me think about how we grow personally. It's often like this cycle of learning, messing up, then picking ourselves up and trying again, getting a little bit closer each time.
Precisely. Like a craftsperson getting better with practice, alchemists thought it was important to refine their skills and understanding by constantly working with these principles.
So it's about embracing those refinements, realizing that real change, whether it's matter or our spirit, rarely follows a straight line.
Exactly. It's about navigating the twists and turns, those setbacks, and realizing they're all part of the process.
You're giving me a lot to think about in terms of how I approach challenges.
Yeah.
So after all the refining, what was the ultimate goal? Was it just about creating perfect gold, or was there something more?
That gets to the heart of alchemy. Yes, they often saw gold as the ultimate physical result, but remember what it symbolized to them.
We've talked a lot about symbolism today.
Yeah.
So when they looked at that gold, what did it represent?
Purity. Achieved through trials and fire, it showed them how powerful the universe is, how even the most basic things can be made perfect.
It's a powerful image.
Yeah.
It's like saying we all have that potential for transformation, that greatness exists in each of us.
Exactly. And remember, the journey to become like gold, that was just as important, maybe even more important than the end result. It was about those internal changes, reaching a state of inner harmony.
So the real gold wasn't the metal itself, but the alchemist who is transformed.
Precisely. The true alchemist went through those fires of transformation, understanding not just the universe better, but themselves as well.
This deep dive has been eye-opening. We've explored ancient knowledge, cracked secret codes, and uncovered how transformation works. It's given us a lot to think about.
It has. And maybe even more importantly, it's given us some tools, some insights to use in our own lives, on our own journeys of personal and spiritual growth.
Absolutely. Because that's what Hermetic philosophy is all about. Not just knowing stuff, but using that knowledge to change ourselves and the world.
It's about recognizing we're not separate from the universe, but a part of it. And by understanding alchemy, by aligning ourselves with nature's rhythms, we can tap into that transformative power and make real change.
This has been amazing, and I'm excited to see where these ideas take us.
As am I. That's the beauty of Hermetic philosophy. It's a journey without end, full of exploration, discovery, and of course, transformation. All right, diving in. This time we're tackling Fables, Egyptiennes, Grecques. And honestly, I thought it was going to be like straight up mythology. But this Pernety, Totally different game.
Different how?
It's like, instead of just telling the stories, he's using them, right? Almost like, I don't know, it's a secret language for alchemy?
Ah, see, that's what makes Pernety so fascinating.
Yeah.
He takes these familiar myths, like the big ones, Osiris, Jason, and he doesn't just retell them, he uses them as a framework for understanding alchemy, like a hidden layer of meaning.
Yeah, so instead of just Zeus and lightning bolts, we get, like, I don't know, deeper truths about, like, the natural world, even ourselves, maybe.
Exactly.
Hmm.
And we can't forget the historical context here. Pernety's drawing on Hermeticism, which has been around for centuries, is this idea that the universe is a reflection of itself.
Wait, so that as above, so below thing?
Exactly. That's Hermeticism in a nutshell. And it goes back to ancient Egypt, Hermes Trismegistus, all that, the microcosm and the macrocosm all connected.
Okay, but Pernety, he actually connects the dots, right? Between
Right.
these myths and the natural world and alchemy. This is going to be good. All right, so Parmenides using these myths like some kind of secret code for alchemy. But how does that actually work? Like, can you give us an example? How does he connect, say, Osiris to all this?
Okay, so let's break that down. The Osiris myth with Isis and Typhon, it's a classic, right?
Okay.
And Pernety uses it brilliantly. Start with Osiris. He's the sun god, right? A fixed presence, unchanging.
Yeah, powerful, eternal. Go on.
So in alchemy, that lines up with the fixed principle. Think of it like gold. Alchemists saw gold as perfect, unchanging,
So Osiris is like the alchemical gold.
in a sense. Now, flip over to Isis. She's often linked to the moon. Phases, cycles, always in motion.
Right, right. So she's the opposite then.
Exactly. She embodies that volatile principle, always changing, like silver that tarnishes, transforms. But there's still that third player, right? Typhon, what about him?
Yeah, he's the chaos, the bad guy, throws everything off balance.
And there's your alchemical link again. Typhon is the corrupting force, the imperfection that needs refining, like the raw materials alchemists work with.
Oh, wow, I see where you're going with this.
And it goes even deeper, because Pernety connects the stages of the Osiris myth, death, rebirth, the whole struggle, to the actual phases alchemists used in the lab.
No way, seriously, it's all linked together like that.
Totally. Blackening, whitening, reddening. These processes they describe mirror the Osiris myth, showing how nature and alchemy are intertwined.
These old stories are suddenly feeling very relevant. It's like they're not just stories, you know? But are there other examples like this?
Absolutely. Take the story of Jason and the Golden Fleece. Classic hero's journey, faces danger, has to get this treasure guarded by a dragon.
Oh, I love that story. Okay, what's the alchemical connection there?
Well, that Golden Fleece. Pernety sees it as the philosopher's stone, the legendary substance alchemists believed could transform base metals into gold.
Makes sense. But what about the dragon? Just a cool monster to make the story exciting.
Not at all. The dragon guarding the fleece. That symbolizes the challenges of alchemy, the volatile forces that need to be mastered for transformation to happen.
So Jason's not just battling a monster, he's battling the very essence of change and transformation that alchemists are trying to harness.
Yeah.
It really makes you think about these myths in a whole new way.
Exactly. And here's something else that's interesting. Pernety wasn't just some armchair philosopher. He was a practicing alchemist, fascinated by the actual laboratory processes.
Really? Like hands-on stuff. What kind of things did he talk about?
He gets into some specifics, putrefaction, for example.
Putrefaction? Sounds kind of gross.
Well, it is what it sounds like. It's about breaking down matter, letting it decay as part of its transformation. And this idea wasn't just limited to alchemy. It even influenced medicine. And then there's the whole idea of the correct fire, meaning the right type of heat for these alchemical processes. It's all about balance and understanding subtle energies.
Pernety sounds like the real deal. Part mystic, part scientist. But with all this talk about transformation, the philosopher's stone, I gotta ask, was it really about making gold from lead? Or was there something more to it?
Now, that is the million-dollar question, isn't it? And to understand Pernety's answer, we need to look at one more myth. King Midas.
Midas, huh? Okay, so the golden touch, right. Everything he touches turns to gold. But it's like the worst blessing ever because he can't even eat. What's Pernety see in that story?
It's a perfect choice, though, don't you think? The Midas myth. It's Pernety's way of saying, look, just because you can do something doesn't mean you should, or that it'll make you happy.
Yeah, Midas is like the cautionary tale, alchemy gone wrong.
Right. He gets the gold, but at what cost? Pernety's warning against going after alchemy for the wrong reasons. Greed, basically. Material wealth.
Because for Pernety and those Hermetic traditions, it was about more than that, right?
Absolutely. Remember, inner transformation was just as important as any experiment in the lab. It wasn't just about turning lead into gold. It was about refining yourself.
That's kind of a cool way to think about it. Our own personal alchemy, I guess.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Think about it. What are your own base metals, right? What are those things you want to change about yourself? The flaws, the weaknesses holding you back. Pernety would say, that's the real work.
Wow. So less about literal gold, more about becoming a better version of yourself. That's quite a deep dive we just did.
And that journey never really ends, does it? Just like those myths, always more to uncover.
This has been incredible, I gotta say. And for anyone listening who's now just as fascinated by all this as I am, definitely check out Pernety's book, Fables, Egyptiennes et Grecques. It'll make you think about those old stories and maybe even yourself in a whole new way.